Bedtime Reading. The Sorrows of Young Werther. Preface. The following is everything I have been able to learn of the sad story of young Werther. I am certain that you will come to love him and appreciate his goodness. If you, the reader, now suffer from the same problems as this man did, I hope that this story might become a friend to you and help you to feel better. Book 1. May 4th. I know it sounds terrible, but I must say, dearest friend, that I am glad we are now apart. I cannot explain why. Do not be angry with me. I still like you as much as I always do. Ah! I pity Leonora. She fell in love with me, while I was really only interested in her young sister. I feel a little guilty about it, because there were times when I gave her attention only for the purpose of making her love me even more. Oh, but I should not let this bother me so much. It is now over and done with. I must break my habit of worrying so much about every little problem that comes my way, and keep my eyes always looking forward. I must try to appreciate the happiness in my life now, at this moment, and let the sadness of the past remain in the past. Too many people in this world waste their time thinking so much about their earlier troubles, rather than dealing with their current situation. Do me a favor and let my mother know that I am doing exactly what she asked me to do, and that I should have news for her soon. I just met my aunt and found that she is quite different from the way most people describe her. She is very friendly and caring. We talked about the way my mother has held on to the money that she, my aunt, was supposed to receive. It seems that we might be able to come to an agreement of some kindness about this, but it is still too early to say for certain. Tell my mother that I am doing my best. This whole situation has shown me how the troubles of our world are caused more by mistakes people make in their judgment than by evil or hatred. As for myself, I am doing quite nicely here. This place is very lovely and peaceful, and helps me to feel happier than I usually do. There are so many flowers. I wish I could turn into a butterfly and spend my life enjoying flying from one to the other. There's a beautiful garden up on a hill that was created by the Count M, who recently died. I am now living in a small house that used to be his. I love it, although it sometimes makes me feel sad to think that he could no longer enjoy living there. Occasionally, the idea even brings me to tears. Anyway, the man who cares for the garden seems to like me, so all is generally well. May 10th. My goodness, how wonderful I am feeling lately. The beauty of this place has filled my heart with so much happiness. I am enjoying the place so much that I have not yet practiced my drawing even once. My pencils lie sleeping in their case, while I lay in the middle of fields of tall grass, and yet I feel I am more of an artist now than ever before. I feel I have begun to know God better through nature. I see Him when I see the sun shining down upon me through the green leaves of the trees. I see Him when I put my face near the ground and watch and listen to the small insects busy with their work. When I notice these things, I feel His love for all things, large and small, visible and invisible. At such moments, I wish that I could somehow express this feeling on paper and let it be a way for other people to see my true spirit and to see God. But such a thing is too big for me, too great. I feel helpless and small among all this beauty. May 12th. I wish that I could describe the comfortable feeling I have in this place. There is a lovely water fountain just down the hill from the front door of the house. It is surrounded by a group of tall trees, which keep the area nice and cool. Every day I sit by the fountain for at least an hour. Sometimes girls from town will come to gather water in buckets. It reminds me of the days, long ago, when this was the job of the king's daughters. I feel as though I am living in those days, and I can understand that old way of life. There is something magical about it. It makes the old belief that these fountains were guarded by spirits more real for me. If you have never felt this way before, then you have not had the fortune to sit by a fountain at the end of a long, hot day in May. May 13th. Thank you for offering to mail some books to me. However, I beg you do not. I am already quite sensitive these days. You know better than anyone how my feelings can change so quickly from happy to sad, calm to terribly upset. I have been taking it easy lately, reading classic Greek literature. However, please do not tell anyone this, for they might criticize me. May 15th. I have become quite popular with the people here. In the beginning, they were not so friendly toward me. But now that they see my kindness is true, they have begun to like me. It bothers me how some educated people refuse to have contact with common people for fear that they themselves will be seen as common. On the other hand, those who are friendly with the common people sometimes make them feel that they are lowering themselves to their level. In my opinion, it is better to be like the second kind of person, for the first type has no courage. He hides himself in fear, like a small animal. Just recently, I met a servant girl at the fountain. Seeing that there was no one there to help her, I walked down and offered my services. She was quite embarrassed, but I insisted on helping her anyway. I gently placed the bucket on top of the cloth on her head. Before walking back up the stairs toward town, she turned back toward me, smiled, and said, "Thank you, sir." May 17th. Unfortunately, although I have met many friendly people here, our differences are so great that it seems unlikely any of them will become good friends of mine. If I had to describe them for you, I would say that they are just like everyone else in the world. They are their own slaves. They work terribly hard to make only just enough money to stay alive. I must say, however, that they seem like very nice people. Sometimes I let myself go and enjoy a meal with them, even take part in their singing and dancing. At these moments, I actually feel very good. However, sadly, I have to hide the other parts of my personality from them, for I fear that they would not understand me and then turn against me. Recently, I was introduced to a young man named V. He just graduated from college and obviously thinks that he is more intelligent than most people. Hearing that I am an artist and that I can speak Greek, he came to visit me at my home. He tried to impress me with all of his knowledge. I just remained quiet and let him speak the whole time. God, how boring he was. I have also met someone whom I like. He's a local judge and a very nice fellow. I hear that he has many children. I plan to visit him soon since he has invited me. He lives quite far outside of town. He moved there after his wife died in order to avoid the places that reminded him of her sad memory. I have met several other people as well. However, their characters are all quite unpleasant. None of them would make good friends. That is all for now. May 22nd. Lately, I have felt as though I were living in a dream. I feel as though man is nothing in the universe. We work so hard to understand our world, and yet, the progress we make does nothing more than help us to live longer. It does not give our lives more meaning or purpose. We are all prisoners doing nothing more than decorating the walls of our prison. When I look at myself, I find that I am not at all clear in my mind. I do not know what I want, and I am just as lost and confused as anyone else in this world. At these moments, I just close my eyes and let my dreams carry me through the world. It seems to me that most people just live their lives without thinking. They are like children. They let their desires lead them through the world, like donkeys with carrots in front of their eyes. Of course, no one will admit this, but I believe it is true. I can hear your argument already. These people who childishly follow their simple desires are really happy. Yes, that is true. And of course, there are others who take themselves very seriously and act as though whatever they do is very important in the world. However, I think that the person who can recognize the selfishness in both of these ways of life will be the happiest. This person can remain a little freer than the others, and there is always the comforting knowledge that he can leave this jail whenever he wants. May 26th. As you know, I have a habit of moving around and making little homes for myself in the countryside. I have found another little place here as well. Not far from the town is a village known as Walheim. It was by chance that I found the house there. I was walking about one afternoon when I came upon a little boy sitting on a hill with a baby in his arms. I took the opportunity to draw this cute picture in my notebook. While drawing the countryside around him, I noticed this little house. It belongs to a kind old woman who manages a small hotel nearby. It is one of the most relaxing and peaceful places I have ever seen. I like to go there often to sit under the linden trees with a cup of fresh coffee and read my book. Its location on a high hillside allows me to look out upon much of the countryside. After I finished my drawing of the child, I looked at the picture and noticed that I had not added any of my own ideas to it. I simply drew what was exactly before me. Nature is much more creative than man, after all. From now on, I will just draw the world as it is. There is no need to use my imagination. People like to follow rules when making art because it is safer. They know that by using the rules, they will never create something terribly bad. However, rules limit the artist's expression too much. They make his work less meaningful. I will give you an example. A young man falls in love with a girl and, in order to show his love, devotes all of his time and money to her. Then he meets a gentleman who tells him, "You must give your life more balance. Some of your time must be put toward work, while the rest can be given to the girl. Budget your money well and use the extra money to buy her things, but only on important days like her birthday and holidays." For the common man, this might be good advice to follow. For an artist, however, he cannot arrange things so clearly. The river of inspiration seldom flows, but when it does, it needs to be able to flow freely. People like this gentleman build up walls along the riverside because they fear the river, and they try to make us fear it as well. May 27th. I am sorry. I completely get lost in my thoughts about art and forget to tell you about what happened to the children. A little while later, the boy's mother came along. Seeing me, she said hello, and I politely returned her greeting. She called the older boy Philip and the younger Hans. She explained to me that she had asked Philip to take care of little Hans while she and another son of hers went into town to buy some things.
The oldest boy broke a cooking pot of mine yesterday while fighting with Philip for the last bit of food inside.
And where is the boy? I asked. Just as she was beginning to tell me, the young fellow came running up to us. He had been guiding 2 geese they had bought in town back to their home. After talking with the woman a bit more, I learned that her father was the head of the local school, and that her husband was presently in Switzerland, trying to collect money that a dead relative had left for him. She expressed to me that she was a little worried because she had not heard from him since he had left. I then dug deep into my pockets and pulled out several coins to give each of her children. They became very excited and thanked me. After that, I went away. Dear friend, meeting such a woman always manages to calm my troubled brain. Her life is simple. She is not upset by thoughts of purpose or meaning. The changing of the autumn leaves means nothing more to her than that the weather will soon turn cold. It has become my habit to visit that family quite often. I always give her children coins on Sundays, and I share my food and drink with them. It is quite enjoyable to watch the children play with others. I feel that I have really gotten to know them well. I have noticed, however, that the woman worries I might feel obligated to give them money. I have been trying my best to comfort her that is not at all my thinking. May 30th. I find that I always have to relate my enjoyment of nature back to art somehow. I do not know why. It is truly troublesome. Anyway, I feel that an experience I had today would make a perfect little subject for a simple poem. The whole thing started with a gathering of people under the linden trees in Walheim. Again, I cannot say why, but Walheim is proving to be a most interesting place for me. Anyway, I did not enjoy being around these particular people very much, so I walked off by myself, in order to be alone for a while. As I was walking, I saw a fellow working on some farming equipment I had recently drawn in my book. I approached him and introduced myself. We then had a pleasant conversation. I learned that he was working for a young woman whose husband had recently died. It was clear to me, by the way he spoke about her, that the fellow was very much in love. Her husband was so terrible to her, I don't think that she would ever want another one, he told me. This man's love for her was so complete that I could see it in his every word and movement. I could see it in his face and in his eyes. In fact, it was so complete that in order to describe it accurately, I would have to be a great poet. What moved me even more was the effort he made to make sure I did not misunderstand him and think that he and this woman had some sort of inappropriate relationship. He assured me of her goodness and purity. Again, it would be impossible for me to repeat to you the way he described her to me. I truly admire the man's feelings for her. I have never met such love for another person before, a love so strong and true. I must admit that it has influenced my own heart a great deal. I desperately want to meet this woman. But, on second thought, it might be best for me never to see her, for the real person might destroy the perfect image I have of her now. June 16th. You complain that you have not received any letters from me, but I thought you might have known the reason. I have fallen in love with someone. I do not know if she feels the same about me. I am not sure that I can tell you very clearly about how we met one another. I can only say that it pleases me greatly to know this wonderful woman. It is not easy for me to explain why it is I feel so strongly about her. I simply cannot stop thinking about her. She is kind, but strong. Her thoughts are peaceful, but her spirit is full of energy. Oh, but I must stop this. I am saying nothing. Maybe I will wait to write about her to you. My mind is too wild now. No, I must write about her now. To tell you the truth, from the moment I began this letter, I have had a great desire to put this pen and paper away and run out the door to go and see her. I have had to force myself all day to remain here. Oh, Wilhelm, I failed. I went to her. I have just now come back. I am presently writing this at my dinner table. My goodness, how happy it made me to find her spending time with her 8 brothers and sisters. I see now that I am not being clear. I am writing as though I were writing in my diary. All right then, prepare yourself, for I will now tell you the whole story. Do you remember the local judge I wrote to you about? I finally managed to visit his home in the country. Oh, how my heart shakes when I think about how I almost did not go at all. Luckily, fortune has been on my side lately. A group of young people decided to have a party outside of town. To this party, I accompanied a lovely but rather uninteresting girl. In the carriage, the girl's cousin joined us as well. On the way there, we stopped at a hunting lodge.
Be careful now,
the girl whispered to me.
You are about to meet a very lovely young woman. Don't let yourself fall too easily in love with her. She has already arranged to marry a man who has just gone to collect the money his recently dead father left for him.
I did not pay much attention to her words, for I felt they were a little childish. While getting down from the carriage, I was met by a servant, who told me that the lady was still preparing to go.
Miss Charlotte will only be a minute or so,
she informed me. Looking up at the sky, I noticed some dark clouds were beginning to come together.
Oh, I hope it doesn't rain. How horrible that would be,
said my partner's aunt from the carriage. Don't worry, it won't, I replied, trying to comfort her, while feeling quite worried about the weather myself. I then went to the lodge and entered the front door. Inside, I found a beautiful but simply dressed woman standing in the center of a group of children. She was handing out slices of bread to each child, giving larger pieces to the older ones. She did this very carefully and lovingly. Each child waited patiently with his hands held forward, and then, once given the food, would immediately run off to eat it, or would go outside to the front of the house to see who had come to take their Charlotte away for the evening.
I apologize for not being ready,
said the young woman.
I was so busy this evening that I forgot to prepare dinner for the children. They won't eat any food unless it's cooked by me.
I did not respond in my usual humorous way, for I was so impressed with her I could not think clearly. The children watched as I went to the smallest of them, a very cute little thing. He moved away from me with a frightened look on his face.
Be nice to your cousin, Louis,
I heard Charlotte say behind me. The boy then did as his sister told him and held out his hand for me to shake. Are we now relatives? I said, joking to Charlotte.
I call all of my friends cousin,
she replied. Just before going, she asked her 11-year-old sister, Sophie, to watch the other children until she returned later in the evening.
And tell father hello for me when he comes home.
The children all seemed sad to see their sister go. 2 of her brothers even ran and jumped onto our carriage. She asked them to come down, but I said that it would be fine for them to ride with us for a short time, if they wanted to. My partner for the night and her aunt politely greeted Charlotte and made friendly comments about her clothing. She too returned the compliment and then asked her little brothers to go and obey Sophie. They both took her hand and, one by one, kissed it before running away and promising to be good.
Are you done yet with the book I gave you?
The aunt asked Charlotte as we drove along.
To be honest, I'm giving it back to you. I don't enjoy it much, she answered.
I asked Charlotte the name of the book, and could not believe it when she said, "We have not included the name here in order to avoid hurting the author's feelings." I was impressed with the way she talked about the book, and I could see that she appreciated my ability to understand her feelings about it.
As a girl, I like to read love stories,
she said.
I would often go to a comfortable place in my home and spend the day experiencing the joy and sadness of a romance. Now, however, I have less time, so I only read books that have stories similar to my own life experience. This pleases me most of all.
I managed to control my excitement until she began to talk about books I had recently read. Immediately, I shared my own opinions with her about them and started a long discussion with her about them. I went on for so long that I completely forgot about the other two people in the carriage. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed the aunt giving me an unhappy look. I, however, was so happy that I did not care. Charlotte then talked about her love of dancing and music.
When I feel sad, I just play a dance song on the piano and I feel better again,
she said. I know that you, my friend, can imagine the way I felt hearing such words come from her beautiful red lips. I felt drunk with excitement, and did not even realize we had arrived at the party, until everyone else was already out of the carriage. Almost immediately, two men, who had arranged to be their partners for the evening, approached Charlotte and the aunt. Together we all entered the party and joined in a dance. Charlotte's dancing is so wonderful to watch. Her movements are so full of energy. You can tell that she is thoroughly enjoying herself, and that all other people and things disappear from her mind for the moment. I was fortunate to get to dance with her during the third song. It was a waltz.
Traditionally, we dance the waltz with the same partner from the song before,
she said to me.
But because I noticed that both of our partners are quite bad at this kind of dance, I wonder if we could change partners for the moment, and you and I dance together. I saw that you are quite good.
This was arranged, and we then walked out to the dance floor. Oh, what dancing! At first we had trouble because there were some people who did not know what they were doing. After a while, however, we were able to free ourselves from them and dance with a smaller group. I have never felt so good before. Moving about the floor with this beautiful girl in my arms, it was like a dream. I promised myself from that moment never to let any woman I love waltz with another man. Afterward, we rested in the next room. I went to the food table and got the last orange. I gave it to Charlotte to enjoy. It hurt me greatly when I saw her offer, as a friendly gesture, some pieces of it to the people sitting next to her. A little later, as we began the next dance and were swinging one another around with the greatest pleasure, I caught sight of a slightly older but lovely woman looking seriously at Charlotte. She then pointed to my happy little dance partner and said,
"Don't forget, Albert."
Naturally, I wanted to know who Albert was, so I asked Charlotte. At that moment, however, we had to move away from each other in order to follow the dance. When we came back together, I saw that her face looked a little serious suddenly. Then she said,
"Well, I needn't hide the truth. He's the man I am to marry."
I, of course, had been told about this in the carriage, but I still felt terribly disappointed. Oh, so greatly disappointed. In fact, I was so upset that I suddenly lost my place in the dance, and made it necessary for Charlotte to try and keep my movements under control. Still, I managed to destroy the dance for everyone else. Before the dance was over, a storm had gathered above the hall. The thunder and lightning came as a great surprise to the dancers, and many of them, all girls, began to scream and cry from fright. Even though it was just a storm, the people reacted to it in an extreme way, probably because they had been so unaware of its approach. Some of the women were even holding each other like the end of the world had finally come. The hostess of the party then calmed everyone by offering the comfort of another room with much smaller windows. Once inside the new room, Charlotte immediately went to work arranging a circle of chairs in order to play a game and take everyone's mind away from the storm outside.
"All right, we'll play a counting game,"
she announced to the group.
"I'll walk around the outside of the circle, and each person I pass must count up the next number. I will go around the circle until we get to 1,000. If someone says the wrong number, he is to be boxed on the ear."
We all had a good time. When someone made a mistake, wham! Charlotte would hit him and everyone would laugh. Someone else then made mistakes and got hits as the game increased in speed. I too got hit, for I made a couple of mistakes. It seemed to me that she hit me more forcefully than the others, and this made the experience even more enjoyable. Before getting to 1,000, the game ended due to so much laughter. By this time, the storm had also stopped, and everyone went into different little groups to talk. I accompanied Charlotte back to the dance area.
"It seems my little game helped people to forget the storm,"
she said.
"I was pretty frightened too, but I pretended not to care."
Standing near a window, I could see the storm moving further away, the thunder sounding more and more gentle. The air smelled of rain. I looked over at Charlotte and saw her watching the rain. Her eyes then returned to mine, and I could see tears beginning to form. Gently touching my hand, she said,
"Klopstock."
Immediately, I recalled this famous writer's poem and knew what she meant. This filled me with so much feeling that I could not help crying as well. Without thinking, I pressed my lips to her hand. At that moment, I pitied Klopstock for never having the opportunity to look into this woman's eyes. June 19th. I do not recall how much I told you the other night in my letter. I was up until very late writing it. It is a good thing you were not here, or I would have surely talked to you until sunrise. You still do not know about our ride home together. I will not go into too much detail. Everyone else in the carriage was asleep except for Charlotte and myself. She asked me if I was feeling very sleepy. I turned toward her and, looking directly into her eyes, said, "It would be impossible for me to sleep while you are awake." When we finally reached her home, I walked her to the front door. Everyone was asleep inside. I asked her if I could visit her the following day. She agreed, and I returned to the carriage. Since then, my mind can only think of her. Everything else seems so unimportant. June 21st. I have never felt so much happiness in my life as I do now. I have recently moved to Walheim so that I can be closer to Charlotte. How could I ever have guessed that my aimless wandering about the countryside would eventually lead me to such heavenly place? How many times must I have passed that hunting lodge, unaware of the woman it held inside, the one woman who could so capture my heart? I find it interesting that when I first looked upon the countryside from that hill at Walheim, I was filled with a great desire to explore all the wonderful little areas before me. I went to them and then returned, feeling unsatisfied. It seems as though looking at things from far away is much like looking at our own future. We make goals for ourselves. We dream of reaching them. Then, once we do, we still feel as empty and unhappy as before. Men who travel the world searching for happiness often become terribly homesick and then find upon their return to their wife and family that the thing they were looking for already existed in their own home. As the sun is rising, I enjoy going out to fill my bag with vegetables, which will later be my supper. I then sit down to work, removing their outer covering and cleaning them, taking occasional breaks to read Homer. And finally, I put them in a pan and cook them over a hot stove, being careful to stir them regularly so they don't burn. All of this makes me feel like one of the men in Homer's book, who prepares his food while patiently waiting outside beautiful Penelope's castle, hoping that she will choose him as her husband. I feel as though I can enjoy the same happiness and satisfaction that a common farmer feels as he eats the vegetables he has grown. June 29th. A day or so ago, the town doctor came to see the judge. He was very disappointed to find me there, playing around with Charlotte's brothers and sisters. He is a quite serious fellow and seemed to feel that my behavior was inappropriate for a grown man. To be honest, I did not care what he thought. However, afterward, he went around town saying that I was spoiling the judge's children too much. I must admit that I cannot help myself with children. I love being able to see their characters beginning to form. I love their purity. We adults should admire them more than we do. We should not try to control them so much. We, who are so imperfect and so dissatisfied with ourselves, always strive to make our children like ourselves. Why? Because we are more wise? Because we have lived longer and experienced more? I think that it should be quite the other way around. We should be learning from them. I'll stop here, Wilhelm. The topic is a very confusing and upsetting one for me. July 1st. My poor heart suffers from not being near Charlotte these last few days. She is away in the town, watching over a dying woman who asked for her company. She and I went to a mountain village together just the week before to see the priest of S. He is quite an old man. When we arrived, we found him sitting in a chair outside his home, under a couple of trees. As soon as he saw Charlotte, he forgot himself and immediately stood up to walk toward her. Knowing that he could not walk well, Charlotte quickly ran over to him and helped him back down into his chair. She read him a couple of letters from her father, and then began to play with the fellow's grandchild. I cannot tell you how moved I was to see how kind she was toward the man. And the man, you could clearly see, appreciated all her efforts. His mood brightened so much that he seemed to become a few years younger. Noticing the attention I was paying to the two huge trees that he sat under, he even managed to gather enough strength to tell us about their history. I'm not exactly sure about the age of the older one, but this other one here is exactly as old as my wife. Her father put it into the ground here the very same day that she came into this world. Then, 27 years ago, I met my wife right here for the first time. She was sitting under this tree, sewing clothes. The old fellow's daughter, Frederica, soon appeared in the courtyard with a young man, whom I guessed was her boyfriend. She was a very pretty brown-haired girl with a pleasant character. Her boyfriend was quiet and would not, no matter how hard Charlotte tried, talk much with us. I soon learned that his quietness was not from shyness, but from a bad attitude. The four of us then took a walk together, and as I was talking to Frederica, I noticed that her boyfriend's face began to look angry. Charlotte placed her hand on my arm to suggest that I not talk so much with Frederica. I simply hated Wilhelm when men behave like this fellow. Instead of enjoying the moment, they spend it in being upset for no reason. When, later on, at the priest's dinner table, people were discussing the troubles of today's world, I took the opportunity to express my opinion about people who have bad attitudes. So often do I hear people say that they are seldom happy, I began. They don't seem to appreciate the wonderful things God has given us in this world.
But not everyone can control their moods,
the priest's wife argued.
Especially people who are ill.
That is true, I agreed. But in that case, we ought to simply find a treatment for the illness.
I think every person is different,
Charlotte said.
If I feel upset or sad, all that I have to do to make myself happy again is sing a couple of dance songs.
Exactly, I cried. People have bad attitudes because they are too lazy to try and be happy. Frederica's boyfriend disagreed. He felt that people could not control their nature. But it's the people who never try to change their feeling remain unhappy. They should at least try. I then noticed the priest putting his hand to his ear, trying to listen. Speaking louder, I said, "We're talking about people with bad attitudes." "Ah," he cried, "only city people have bad attitudes. We countryside people are all happy." Everyone at the table laughed until the old man started to cough loudly. Once he was fine again, Frederica's boyfriend continued his argument from before. "You talk of bad attitudes, but maybe some people are just naturally unhappy. Aren't you being a little too hard on them?" "If they are unhappy," I replied, "why must they try and make everyone else around them unhappy as well? He should keep his unhappiness inside himself and not upset others. I also think that people hate it when they see that they are not the cause of other people's happiness. It makes them angry with the happy person." I was speaking passionately now, and saw that Frederica's eyes were beginning to water. "I think that these people are cruel. We should all be free to enjoy happiness." My voice began to shake with emotion as certain moments of my past came suddenly into my mind. What will the horrible man feel when he is standing next to the deathbed of the girl he caused to die from sadness? Seeing that she cannot be helped, that he cannot save her or change the way he had treated her, he will suffer the worst guilt in the world. He will never be able to forgive himself. In truth, I had seen such a situation occur before, and the memory of this became too much for me to handle. I immediately rose from the table, with my arm over my eyes to try and hide the tears that were now coming, and ran from the room. On our way home, Charlotte was very kind. She told me that I should not be so passionate about everything. She was worried that it might hurt me eventually. Thank you, dear Charlotte. Because of you, I will take better care of myself. July 6th. Charlotte still watches over her ill friend in town. I managed to see her, however, just yesterday. I saw that her sisters were accompanying her to town, and I joined them in their walk. We stopped at the fountain I described to you before, and a funny little thing happened there. The younger sister, Jane, came to Charlotte carrying a cup of water. Marianne, the other sister, wanted to drink it, but Jane would not let her.
"It's for Charlotte."
Jane's sweetness filled my heart with joy. I looked over at Charlotte and then could no longer help myself. I lifted the child up and gave her a big kiss on the cheek. She started to cry from fear of me. Charlotte turned to me and said,
"Why did you do that?"
Then she walked little Jane over to the fountain and helped her to wash my kiss from her face. The little girl rubbed her cheek so hard and for so long, it was as if she thought I had some terrible illness to give her. This little girl's desire to be pure was so strong. It moved me and somehow increased my respect for Charlotte. She was no longer just a woman to me. She was the goddess of purity. When, later on, I told a man in Walheim about what happened, he felt that Charlotte should not have let the child fear so much. There was nothing physically wrong with giving a child a kiss. I, however, supported Charlotte and argued that children should be allowed to believe in whatever they want. They are happier that way. July 8th. I am like a foolish little boy. But I'm terribly upset about the way Charlotte's eyes, so beautiful. Anyway, sorry, but I am very tired just now. As she was climbing into a carriage with her friends today, I stood nearby talking with a couple of fellows. We were having a nice time and joking a lot. Charlotte looked over in our direction. Her eyes looked first at the man on my left and then the man on my right, but never once looked in my direction. I was staring directly at her, wanting to wave hello to her. The carriage started, and after a few moments, she turned around and looked back in our direction. I keep telling myself that that look was intended for me, but I cannot be sure. Oh, how I hope that it was. God, I am such a stupid little boy. July 13th. Today I saw something in her eyes. I am certain it was there. Love! My dear Wilhelm, I think that she is in love with me. Her love for me makes me feel so good about myself. I feel as though I am the only man in the world for her. I do not know how true this is, however, for she still talks about her boyfriend in such loving ways. At such moments, I feel like a great soldier who has had all of his medals suddenly taken away. July 16th. Oh, how I love the moments when our hands, by chance, meet while we are walking or sitting at dinner. My head starts to spin, and my heart begins to quicken. She, of course, has no idea how this makes me feel inside. There are also times when we are talking that she will innocently place her hand on mine, or come closer to me so that I can feel the air from her mouth on my lips. Oh, such moments! I struggle with my desires, Wilhelm, struggle terribly. It is very difficult for me to describe to you the way I feel when I am with her. Sometimes she plays her favorite song on the piano for me. When I listen, I forget about everything. All sadness and suffering leave me. It makes me believe in the power people say old music once had. There are times when I am so sad that I want to kill myself, but her music can bring me away from such terrible thoughts. July 18th. Life would be so empty without love, like a child's toy light, which paints the wall with shadows. Love can sometimes be only an illusion, but the illusion can sometimes be enough to make us happy. Unfortunately, I had visitors today. Their presence made it impossible for me to see Charlotte the entire day. I was so troubled by this that I asked my servant to go to her home. I could not wait for him to come back. When he did finally return, I was simply made happy by the thought that Charlotte had looked at him. Everything about him, his face, his clothes, all had been touched by Charlotte's eyes. I was so happy that I wanted to kiss him. I probably would have, except that I would have embarrassed both him and myself in front of my guests. Do not laugh, friend, for you would be laughing at my heart. July 19th. All that it is required to make me happy in the morning is the thought, I am going to see her. I even say it aloud, for it feels so good to hear the words bounce off my bedroom walls. The sun seems to shine more brightly on such days, and all is well. July 20th. No, I am sorry, but I will not accept this job with the embassy that you have suggested to me. I hate having a boss. The ambassador is not a good man either. I know that my mother wants me to get a job, but this only makes me laugh. People who do not listen to their own hearts, who only follow the wishes of others, are simply idiots. July 24th. In response to your suggestion that I continue to practice my drawing, I must be honest and tell you that I have drawn nothing for quite a while now. But I have never felt so good, so close to nature. However, while I can enjoy the beauty around me, I cannot seem to express my enjoyment of it. 3 times I have tried to draw Charlotte, and 3 times I have failed. I cannot understand it. I was always so good at drawing people. July 26th. Many times I have attempted to resist the strong desire to see her. However, I cannot stop myself. Just moments after promising to stay away, I find myself walking toward her home. Some evenings, as we are saying good night, she will invite me to come and visit the following day. How could I possibly say no? Other times she will send me a letter, asking me to help her in some way. And if neither of the previous 2 is the case, I simply feel her presence everywhere I go, and feel myself magically pulled toward her. It reminds me of a story my grandmother used to tell me about a mountain that would somehow suck toward itself the metal from passing ships in the sea, causing them to fall apart and the sailors all to drown. July 30th. Sadly, the man Charlotte is to marry has returned. Even if he were clearly a much better man than myself, it would still break my heart to see him with her. In truth, Albert is a very good man. He is good to her and kind to me. Luckily, he has not kissed her in front of me. I do not know what I would do if he did. Somehow, Charlotte manages to keep him and I from hating one another. I respect him for his calm nature, which is quite the opposite of my own. He seems very aware of his luck in having Charlotte, and he does not have a bad attitude. He thinks of me as an intelligent fellow and a good friend of his girlfriend, although I am sure that he probably feels jealous at times. I know that I would if I were he. Anyway, I have no hope for Charlotte any longer. From the very beginning of my relationship with her, I knew about her boyfriend. In our time together, I have never suggested anything beyond friendship, although it has been difficult. Yet I still wear this foolish look on my face when I see that man with a woman I love. I hate it when people tell me to accept a situation, and that nothing can be done. At such times I have to run away into the woods and walk a while. Seeing the 2 of them together makes me act like an idiot. Today Charlotte said to me,
"You frightened me with your behavior last night."
Now I try to see her only at times when Albert is not present. August 8th. I am sorry if I hurt your feelings in my last letter, when I said that I did not like people telling me to give up hope. You made a very good point when you wrote that I have only 2 choices: continue to hope for the hopeless, or act like an adult and stop dreaming this foolish dream that will eventually kill me. It seems like a very simple choice, doesn't it? In fact, it is not. If you were in my situation, you would understand better. If you knew a man who were dying of some illness, would you force him to kill himself in order to get it over with sooner? Anyway, he cannot, because his illness makes him too weak to use the knife that would end his suffering. Oh, I feel sometimes that I could gather my strength and throw away this passion. I wish there were somewhere else I could go to. It is now later in the day. I just finished looking through my diary. From my writing, I could see how purposefully I have got myself into this mess. I knew everything and yet acted as if I knew nothing. and I am still behaving the same way. August 10th. I have realized that it is only love that decides whether a man is happy or not. Here I am in one of the most wonderful and beautiful places in the world, and yet I cannot be happy. I'm around such good people and I am treated so well. Even Albert loves me. He and I have such long and wonderful conversations about the woman we both love. Some moments I feel our relationship is ridiculous, and at others I am touched by our closeness. From him I learned about how Charlotte's mother, as she was dying, asked her to care for her father and the children after her death. Since then, Charlotte has devoted her life to her family, taking care of their every need day and night, and yet she is just as happy as ever before. As I was listening to Albert's stories, I gathered flowers, breathed in their wonderful smell, and then threw them into the stream and watched as they disappeared from sight. He told me that he has just gotten a good job in town, working for the government. I guess this means he will be here all the time now. August 12th. Albert is truly an excellent man. Yesterday I was getting ready to leave him when I noticed 2 guns on his wall. I was just about to make a trip into the mountains and thought that they might be useful to me. Could I borrow those? I asked him. Of course you can, he replied. You'll have to clean them, though. I haven't touched them up in quite some time. In fact, I won't go near them anymore. Why? I asked. Well, a while ago I was visiting a friend in the countryside. I was bored one afternoon because it was raining outside and I could not go anywhere. Somehow, the idea entered my mind that someone could very easily surprise us in the night and rob or even kill us. At once I asked his servant to clean and load my guns. After he had finished, he began joking with the cleaning woman, pointing the guns at her. Well, one of the guns accidentally fired and sent a bullet straight through the poor woman's hand. Since then, I have always kept my guns empty. He then went on for a long time listing every argument that could possibly be used to support the idea of keeping loaded guns in the house. Then he told me why he disagreed with all of the arguments. I soon became bored with the subject. Without thinking, I picked up one of the guns and pointed it at my own head. "What are you doing?" he cried, pulling my arm down. "There are no bullets," I said. "Yes, but still, I don't understand why you'd point a gun at yourself. How can a man even think of doing such a thing?" "Come now," I said. "You cannot say that you know people well enough to understand every single thing that they decide to do. If you did understand, you would not be so quick to think them crazy. Some things are simply wrong, no matter the reason behind it," he said. I suppose that's true. However, what about the man with no money who steals only in order to feed his family? What about the man who finds his wife in bed with another man and kills them both in terrible anger? These people are often forgiven by the judges of our courts. But we are talking about different things. You talk of people who are momentarily crazy. Their actions can be forgiven. But why must society always talk of craziness as being a bad thing? This craziness is called passion, and passionate people are always hated. I myself am very passionate, and this makes people feel uncomfortable. Why? The greatest men in the world, the ones with the most brilliant ideas, are full of passion. They might even be called a little crazy. Who are you to judge such people? You are taking our discussion in another direction. I'm talking about people who kill themselves. That is not the action of a great man. Only weak people kill themselves, because they cannot handle their difficult lives. I was ready to end the conversation right then and there, because I hated hearing such empty words used as an argument against something I felt very deeply about. I calmed, however, and said very gently to him, "It is not weakness at all. What about a country of people who rise up and destroy a government that gives them no freedom? What about a man who saves his child from dying in a fire by lifting a huge piece of wood the child is trapped under? A piece of wood he normally would not be able to lift. Are these people weak?" Albert raised his eyebrows and said, "I'm sorry, but I fail to see how these things are related to what we're talking about." All right, let's look at it in another way. Let's examine what could be going on inside a man's mind when he decides to take his own life. You will agree that there are limits to what a man can handle, both in pleasure and pain. If he gets too much of either, he will be destroyed. So what we are talking about is how well a man can handle his sadness, his pain. I don't believe it is right to criticize a man who kills himself. That would be like criticizing a man for dying of a disease. "Nonsense!" cried Albert. "It makes perfect sense. People die from illness when the natural forces of the body are so weakened that they can no longer repair the damage that has been done. Now take this and think of how certain ideas can get fixed in a man's mind. These ideas can then grow until they begin to control the man and make him powerless. People who do not experience this cannot understand or help such a person. All their advice and encouragement means nothing to the suffering man." This did not satisfy Albert. I then brought up the news about a local girl who recently died after throwing herself into a lake. She lived a very simple life. Most of her time was spent working mainly in the home. Her only idea of fun was going for Sunday walks and chatting with friends about the latest village gossip. Over time, however, new ideas somehow entered her mind and awakened new desires inside of herself. These new desires made her older habits seem boring. Eventually, she met a young man and put all of her hope in him, because he made her feel so good inside. Nothing else then mattered to her. She could think of nothing but him. She hoped to be with him forever. His sweet words to her made her love even greater and her thoughts more hopeful. Her eagerness grew and made her more and more sensitive. Finally, when she reached out to take him into her arms forever, she found that he has gone. Suddenly, her whole world had changed. The one thing that mattered to her in the world, the one thing she gave up everything for, was gone. She became blind to everyone and everything around her. She felt no hope at all. She thought of herself as being alone in the world. There was so much pain inside of her that she jumped into the hands of death, hoping to feel no more. "Now, Albert," I continued, "wouldn't you agree that this poor child had no choice but to kill herself? It would be cold and thoughtless for a man to say that she ought to have waited until her sad feelings went away and another man came into her life. It would be like saying a diseased man should wait until his body recovers, then he will be fine." "I still don't see the similarity you suggest between disease and suicide," said Albert. "Also, this girl you speak of was uneducated. A wiser woman would not have made the same decision." "This isn't about intelligence," I replied. "It's about passion. Passion, when it is at its strongest, totally takes control over intelligence. But I suppose we've talked enough about this today." I then got up to go, feeling troubled because neither one of us could persuade the other of his opinion. Must people always so often misunderstand one another? August 15th. People cannot live without love. I believe that Charlotte would be sad if I were no longer around. And the children want me to visit nearly every day. Today they begged me to tell a story, so during tea time I told them the story of Cinderella. My goodness, how carefully they listened. Just for fun, I changed a part of the story, and they immediately pointed out that that was not what was supposed to happen. From this experience I have learned how a book or poem, once published, can never be changed or improved later by the writer, for the public will not accept the changes. August 21st. She is not mine to have, and yet I still awaken every morning reaching out for her. My dreams play jokes on me by making me believe she is mine when I am asleep. I go to kiss her hand and put my arms around her, only to find myself alone in bed in the middle of the night. My eyes fill with tears from the thought that there is no hope for us to be together. August 22nd. It is terrible, Wilhelm. I cannot seem to do anything anymore. I cannot enjoy my walks outside, nor can I be happy reading Homer. God! How I wish that I were a simple worker, who has nothing but his job to think about. I see Albert sitting at his desk, hard at work, and it awakens within me a desire to work. I think that I would like to try for that embassy job you mentioned a while ago. In the back of my mind, I have the story of the horse that became bored with his freedom and let himself be used by people for work, which, after many difficult years, eventually killed him. I do not know if this is the right thing for me. I think that I just need my life to be different from the way it has been. August 28th. Today is my birthday. Albert and Charlotte sent me a box of wonderful gifts. They gave me a book that I had always wished to have, and a pink ribbon from Charlotte's dress, which I had asked her to give me long ago. They are simple gifts, but they are better than anything else in the world, because they show how thoughtful my two friends are. The ribbon brought back memories of the days when Charlotte and I were alone. But things are as they are, Wilhelm. Many flowers grow and die completely forgotten. Some manage to produce fruit, and others do not. And yet often that fruit ends up going bad, for no one has taken the opportunity to enjoy it. Often I will shake the apples from the trees at Charlotte's home while she waits under the branches for them to fall. August 30th. I am so sad. I do not know why I cannot stop feeling this desire for her. She is always on my mind. Each day I spend endless hours thinking about her until finally I manage to force myself to stop. During the moments I am with her, I lose control over my whole body. My heart beats quickly. I breathe as if someone were holding a knife to my heart, and my vision becomes unclear. There are even times when I begin to doubt whether I am really living. When this happens, I always leave her and go running into the woods. There I will wander into areas that people have never visited, areas without paths. The plants are so thick there that they cut me as I force my way through them. The pain somehow helps me to feel a little better. Then I will lay down on the hard ground, tired and extremely thirsty. Other times I will sleep under a tree at nighttime, only to awaken at sunrise. Even the loneliest man in the world would feel pity for me now. I feel as if my sadness will never end and only death could give me peace. September 3rd. Yes, Wilhelm, you are correct. I have to leave this place. I have spent 2 weeks thinking about going away. She is now in town at a friend's home. Albert is, yes, certainly now would be a good opportunity to go. September 10th. I have much to tell you, Wilhelm. From this night forward, I will be able to handle anything. My eyes will never look upon her again. How I wish that you were here for me to talk to and cry upon. I write this now with a wild heart, barely able to control myself. I have arranged for a carriage to come tomorrow morning. She has no idea that I am leaving. After talking for 2 hours tonight, I managed to keep my plans a secret. And it was quite an interesting talk that we had, Wilhelm. I watched one final time the sun go down behind the mountains of Walheim, while standing under the 2 large trees I had mentioned to you before, near the hotel. It has been my favorite place to spend time while living here. Before, Charlotte and I would often come here together, because it also happened to be her favorite place. Down the road from this area there is a little quiet place that few people visit. There are many trees there, so very little light gets through. This place has always given me a sad and mysterious feeling. It seemed to me that, one day, something very important would happen to me there. Whether good or bad, I do not know. This evening, I waited 30 minutes for Charlotte and Albert to return from the garden. When I heard them coming, I rushed over to them and nervously kissed Charlotte's hand. After a short while, we found ourselves in that dark little area I just wrote about. The 2 of them sat down together, but I was too upset to sit. I walked back and forth in front of them. Noticing the way the moonlight was shining further down the road from us, Charlotte said,
"Such a sight always makes me think of my friends who have died. It makes me feel certain that we will live another life after this one. But I wonder if we will meet each other in that next life. Do you think so, Werther?"
I went over to her with watery eyes and said, "Of course we will." I was so emotional I could not say anything else. I could not believe that she was asking me such a question on the very last night we would be together. She then continued,
"I wonder if those who have died can see what we are doing. Do they know when we are thinking about them? I hope that my dear mother can see that I am doing my best to make her very last dying wish come true. I am taking good care of her children, and feeding them well, and giving them all of my love. They wear nice clothing, and they go to school. I hope that all of her worries are now gone."
"Don't let such thoughts upset you so much, dear," Albert quietly said.
"She was such a wonderful, hard-working, beautiful woman. You must remember the great conversations we once had with her. I wish that I could be the way she was."
I threw myself at her feet, seizing her hand. "Charlotte," I said, "God's blessing and your mother's spirit are upon you."
"How I wish you had known her,"
she replied. I felt so honored. I almost fell over from weakness.
"She died so young, just after having her last baby, who was only 6 months old. All that she cared about was her children. In her last moments, she asked me to gather the children around her. When they were all there, she whispered a prayer to heaven for them all, and then asked that I take good care of them. 'Be good to your father as well,' she said, 'and help him to be happy when I'm gone.' Albert, you remember this. You were there. She called you over to her as well, and wished us a happy life together."
Albert suddenly became more emotional than I had ever seen him before. He kissed Charlotte and promised to be with her always. I was so moved that I could not speak. It is hard to accept when God takes such dear people away from us. Even the children cried out the question, "Why did they take our mother from us?" when the men removed her coffin from our home. Charlotte then got back to her feet and said,
"It's getting late. We ought to go."
I took her hand and would not let go of it when she tried to pull it back. I promise that we will be together again. I will leave, but we will meet again. Goodbye. Goodbye.
Of course, we'll probably see you tomorrow,
she said, smiling. It hurt me to hear that last word, tomorrow. I cried as I watched them walk back toward Charlotte's home. Just as they were about to walk out of my sight forever, I ran down the road in order to catch one last look of her white dress as it slowly moved into the darkness through the entrance to the garden. I held my arms out toward her, and then she was gone. Book 2, October 20th. I do not know what is wrong with this ambassador. He has a terrible attitude. He has not left his room since we arrived yesterday. I can see now that this job is not going to be an easy one, but I must try to keep a happy view of things. Happy, if only I did not have to watch so many fools around me, acting as though they were great men. Why cannot I, a person with real talents, have the same kind of confidence about myself? You have given me good advice, Wilhelm. Being around other people is making me feel much better. I now realize the bad thing about being alone for too long. Without people around us, we begin to feel that everyone else is better than we are. Working again has lifted my spirits and helped me to feel better about myself. I have once again joined in the big competition of life among men. November 26th. Things are starting to get better here. I continue to meet more people, each with their own ideas about life and the world. There is one man whom I particularly respect, Count C. He is extremely intelligent and surprisingly kind-hearted. He has recognized my intelligence as well, and now speaks to me in a higher way than he does the others. It is a wonderful feeling when someone so important treats you as though you are nearly his equal. December 24th. I knew this ambassador would be troublesome. He is truly a fool. He cannot do anything quickly, nor can he be satisfied when his work is done. He always has to check it and then recheck it. Often he forces me to write a letter for him. The letter is perfect, yet he will always find something wrong with it, and then I must rewrite it 3 or 4 times. It never ends. Thank goodness the Count C is here. He himself said that he was disappointed in the ambassador. He feels the man is too slow and pays too much attention to unimportant details. However, he said, like a mountain that is in our path, we cannot complain that it is there. We simply have to climb it. The ambassador has noticed my friendship with the Count and likes to say bad things about him to me. He says things like, Count C is a smart fellow and his writing is quite good. However, like most brilliant men, his education is incomplete. This really angered me, because I felt he was also talking about me. But I managed to remain calm and simply said, I respect the Count's ability to know so much about the world and yet remain a good, solid businessman. Few people can be so good at so many things. The ambassador did not seem to understand. I left him alone with his own confused thoughts. It is your fault that I am here. You said that I ought to do something different with my life. Now look at me, working like a slave. Actually, a slave's work is much more useful to the world than mine. It makes me ill to see the way so many people behave. They all want to climb the social ladder, and they are shameless about it. One woman here always talks as if her family were the richest in the land, yet she is nothing more than a civil servant's daughter. Why do people act in such embarrassing ways? I try not to be so critical of the people around me, but it is hard. If they would just leave me alone, I would have nothing bad to say about them. January 20th. I simply had to write this letter to you, Charlotte. I have gotten a little room in a hotel in order to get out of a bad storm that has just broken out. Before now, the desire to write to you had never once entered my mind. This storm, however, immediately brought back the memory of our first evening together. Do you remember, dearest Charlotte? My life, since I left you, has just gotten increasingly unhappy. I sleep late and hardly ever go out. People seem to me like nothing but simple puppets. I managed to meet one person who interests me. Her name is Miss B, and she reminds me of you in some ways, but not all. She is full of energy, which can be seen in her beautiful eyes. She finds her status in society troublesome. She does not care at all about being fashionable. She and I both talk about wanting to, one day, leave city life behind us and move to the peaceful, quiet countryside. Then I talk about you to her. She loves to listen to my stories about you. God, how I wish I could be with you now. I miss your children so much. I miss telling them stories. Ah, the sun is going down and the storm has finished. I had better stop here. Goodbye. I suppose Albert is there with you now. Is he important to you? I am sorry to ask this. February 8th. God, the weather has been terrible lately. Just today the snow finished falling. I have, however, managed to keep the weather from upsetting me. A nice sunny day would not make me any happier, because the people around me would still be the same. They do not appreciate the sun when it comes each day. They do not even pay attention to it, for they are too busy destroying themselves and everyone around them. They do this because they are stupid. They say that they do not mean any harm, and yet that does not make me hate them less. How I wish that I could prevent them from doing more damage to themselves. February 17th. I do not think that I can continue working for the ambassador. I disagree with him so often now that I have begun to do things my own way, which he always finds completely unsatisfactory. He actually said something about this to the minister here, who then told me that I must do as the ambassador wishes. I was ready to quit at that moment when I then got a letter from the minister praising my work and respectfully asking that I simply follow the orders of the ambassador. I was impressed by this and immediately calmed. Every day is so emotionally up and down for me. I wish that happiness would not come and go so often. February 20th. Congratulations to the two of you. I hope that you will enjoy the happiness that I know I will never be able to enjoy. It is good that you hid your wedding day from me. I had planned to put away Charlotte's picture when the day was announced. Now, however, that you are already married, I have decided to keep her picture up on my wall. For although I can never be the first man in her life, I hope always to be the second. I would go crazy if she were ever to forget about me. Goodbye, Albert. Goodbye, dearest Charlotte. March 15th. Something unfortunate has just happened to me that will cause me to have to leave this place. I am tired of all this. I want to die. Again, it is all your fault. You pushed me to take this job. Now I have suffered a great deal. I know your first thought will be, Werther is being ridiculously sensitive. In order to prove to you that I am not, I will tell you all that happened. Everyone knows that I have a friendly relationship with the Count of C. He and I had dinner together yesterday, just before a large gathering of high society people at his home. He, the Colonel B, and I were having a pleasant conversation together. when people started to arrive for the gathering. Generally speaking, I do not like high society people, for they tend to look down upon everyone. I was getting ready to leave, when suddenly the charming Miss B entered the room. I began to talk with her, but noticed that she seemed a little uncomfortable. It was true that my clothing looked terribly cheap and out of fashion compared to everyone else. However, I did not guess that Miss B would actually care about such a thing. When I tried talking with a few other people I knew, I found that they were less friendly than usual. I saw small groups of women looking at me and whispering to each other. Eventually, the Count of C approached me and gently led me to a quiet corner. "I do apologize," he then began, "but it seems that the other guests do not feel comfortable with you being here." I apologized as well for having stayed too long and then immediately left the house. When I got back to my hotel, a very nice fellow, came up to me and said, "You look unhappy. I heard about what happened at the Count's home." "It doesn't bother me," I said. "I wanted to leave anyway. I don't like those kinds of people." "It's just unfortunate that so many people know about it already," he added. After that, I began to feel terribly embarrassed. I felt like everyone was looking at me and laughing. It made me even more ridiculous to criticize high society and yet have friends like the Count. I was now the biggest fool among fools. I can handle laughter from fools whom I know are stupid and think incorrectly about something. But when I myself have done something wrong, I cannot help but feel the deepest shame in the world. March 16th. Things have only gotten worse. I ran into Miss B today while she was out walking with some friends. She was kind enough to walk alone with me for a short while. I mentioned to her that she had recently changed her behavior toward me.
You must understand, Werther. Since the day of the gathering, people have continued to talk about you in such terrible ways. I knew, from the moment I saw you at the Count's, what was going to happen. I knew that people would not accept you, and that you would eventually be asked to leave. I have suffered a lot myself because of it.
I felt my heart rise up into my throat, but I held back my tears and managed to say, "What do you mean?" She was crying a great deal now.
My aunt is terribly embarrassed because you and I are friends. Her level in society is the most important thing in the world to her. She had nothing but terrible things to say about you. And I'm afraid that I could not argue against her, for she would not have listened or understood.
It felt like she was pushing a knife through my chest every time she spoke. According to her, things will only get worse. People will continue to be cruel toward me. I have become an enemy to high society, and they are now mine as well. I still have not managed to calm down since this conversation. I have heard about a special breed of horse that will bite one of its veins in order to let the blood flow freely. It helps them to feel better after they have run very hard. I, too, sometimes have the desire to cut myself in order to free my spirit. March 24th. I have just given the court a letter indicating my desire to leave this job. I feel that I can no longer provide satisfactory services for the ambassador. Please tell my mother in the gentlest way possible. She will be disappointed, for she had very high hopes that I might one day become a minister myself. Do not try to change my mind. I have already decided. I will be spending the next month or so with the Prince of, for he has invited me to stay at his home for a time. He and I get along quite well, so I am certain that all will be fine. April 19th. I appreciated getting your 2 letters. I did not write you back sooner because I wanted to hear the court's decision first. Well, they have approved my resignation, although they did not want to. Thankfully, the Crown Prince gave me some money to get by on for a short while. Therefore, I will not have to ask my mother for any help. May 5th. The time has come for me to go from here. Since my hometown is not far, I plan to stop there for a short time. I will visit the home my mother and I sadly left after my father died. Goodbye, Wilhelm. I will write you soon. May 9th. I went to my hometown and was surprised by the feeling it gave me. I exited the carriage right at the village's edge, so that I could walk and slowly allow my memories to return. I passed a favorite tree of mine where, as a child, I used to sit and dream about all the things I hoped to do as an adult. It was painful to come back to that place without having done any of those things. The town was different from before. I liked it less now. Many of the old, beautiful gardens had been replaced by new, less interesting ones. My elementary school had now been made into a store. The market was still there, however, and a flood of memories came into my mind as soon as I entered it. How precious my past suddenly seemed to me. Everything I looked at brought back a different memory and feeling. When I followed a path I used to like walking along as a child, I came upon a stream. I remembered how I once tried to guess the many faraway places that it would pass. It made me think about how much bigger people's imaginations must have been hundreds of years ago. They could not go to distant places. They must have thought of the world as endless. When they wrote about distant lands, they were truly wondrous. Their emotions were very real. The more we seem to learn about our world, the less passionate we are about it. The prince and I are spending a lot of time together at his hunting lodge. I like him. He is a good man, but he has a few friends here who I am not sure I trust very much. They aren't bad men, but they're not exactly the type of men with whom I can be my natural self. Anyway, the prince seems to like me and respects my knowledge and artistic abilities. I always feel disappointed when people like me for this reason, instead of liking me for my nature. I feel that anyone can have knowledge and talent. What makes us all so special is our nature, our heart. May 25th. I never mentioned it to you before, but I actually came to stay with the prince because I had planned to join the army. I mentioned this plan of mine to him the other day, and he immediately suggested against it. His reasons for giving me such advice were quite good. I would have been a fool not to agree with him. I shall have to make other plans. June 11th. Although you would probably not approve of it, I have decided to leave the prince. I feel that I am wasting my time here. He is a very kind fellow, but I find our discussions quite boring and dry. After 1 week, I will move on. I have been drawing a great deal lately. I am happy with my work, but it is very troublesome to hear the prince speak about art like a textbook. He appreciates art, but not in any personal way. He only repeats things that he has read in books, while I speak so much from my heart. July 16th. I have begun my next adventure in the world. I still have no idea where I will go. July 18th. I continue to wander about the country, trying to find the right place for me. However, I know that, in truth, there is only one place for me. I want very much to live close to Charlotte again. I want that more than anything in the world. I grow happy just thinking about the possibility. I must follow my heart, for that is the only way to happiness. July 29th. If only she and I could be married. God, I would thank you until my dying day. I am sorry to cry like this. I am sorry to beg for such impossible things. But oh, what a dream! To be with her, to hold her. It hurts me so much to see Albert touch her. I know, Wilhelm, I would make a better husband for her than Albert. He does not understand her, nor does she understand him. So many times when reading a book, I feel like the story is about Charlotte and myself. Our minds and hearts are so similar. However, I must admit that Albert does truly love her dearly. Is that not enough for him to deserve her love? Damn! Someone has come knocking at my door. I must stop here. I will throw some water on my face and hide the fact that I have been crying. Goodbye, dear friend. August 4th. Many men in the world suffer in the same way I am suffering. Everyone has their dreams, and few actually have them come true. I went to see that woman in Walheim I met a long while ago, while drawing her children. She did not seem happy. I asked her what was the matter. She replied,
"My youngest boy died recently."
I did not know what to say to her.
"And the money my husband was supposed to receive was never given to him. He returned with nothing, and he has been quite ill ever since."
Again, I could say nothing to comfort her. I simply gave her a little money and then went away, feeling terribly sad. August 21st. I admit I am guilty. I sometimes wish that Albert would die, so that Charlotte and I could finally be together. For just a brief moment, I feel hope for my future, and then, realizing the horribleness and hopelessness of the idea, my sadness quickly returns. Returning to the road that first introduced me to that angel of a woman, I find that everything is so different now. I feel like a king standing in front of the wonderful castle that once was his, only to find it now silent, empty, and in bad condition. September 3rd. It is hard for me to accept that a woman, whom I love so much, can have feelings for another man. It does not make any sense to me. I think about nothing but her, and somehow, she manages to seldom think of me. September 4th. Autumn has come and the trees are dropping their leaves upon the ground. I, too, feel that my leaves are changing color and falling from me. I do not know if you can remember the common farmer from Walheim I once mentioned in a letter. Well, I managed to find him a few days ago, and he told me that he had lost his job, and that no one in town would speak to him. His story is quite meaningful to me, so I want to share it with you. When we first began to talk, he seemed a little shy. After a while, however, he began to feel more comfortable with me, and then spoke more openly about himself, until finally he told me everything. It is too bad that I cannot communicate to you clearly his deep feelings as he spoke. It was truly moving. It seems that after meeting me, his desire for the woman he loved continued to grow stronger and stronger, until he no longer could control himself. He lost all desire to eat, and at night he could only lie in bed staring at the ceiling. His mind was so filled with thoughts of her that he began to forget the orders of his boss. One afternoon he saw the woman go to the second floor of her home. Without thinking, he also went up the staircase. When he approached her and expressed his feelings, she would not listen to him. It upset him so much that he grabbed hold of her in a rough way. He could not remember clearly what happened after that. However, he said that he did not mean to hurt her. He had only wanted to be her husband, so that they could be together for the rest of their lives. Then he seemed a little uncomfortable as he told me that the woman began to ask him to do things to her that he did not want to do. He clearly felt guilty and embarrassed for her. Still, however, he said that his love for her was as strong as ever before. It must be obvious to you why this story is so interesting to me. I understand this man's suffering. But I have not told you the ending yet. Not long after that, the woman began to distance herself from this fellow, because her brother was attempting to persuade her to dismiss the man. It seems that the brother did not want her to get married again. He feared that her new husband would spend her money, and then nothing would be left for his, the brother's, own children. Anyway, she eventually dismissed the fellow and soon hired a new servant. Now it is said that the same problem has started all over again with the new man. The brother wants him dismissed as well, because it seems the woman is developing a romance with the man. The poor fellow telling me the story said that he could not live to see her marry another man, especially when he had come so close to having her for himself. I am afraid that I have told the story very badly. If only you could have heard the fellow speak, you would have been deeply moved. It is important that you read this story carefully and understand it well, for my own story is not different. Most people read about love in poetry and feel that it is something unreal. However, this story is proof of the existence of such love. Writing this letter has helped me to feel a little better today. I only wish that I had half the strength of that poor man I have just written about. September 5th. By chance, I read a letter Charlotte had written to her husband, who is currently away on business. In the letter were the words,
"How I miss you, my love. I cannot wait for you to return."
The letter was never sent, because she received news that her husband was going to be leaving for a different place. She saw me smile while reading the letter.
"Why do you laugh?"
she asked. "I was just pretending that these words were meant for me," I replied. She seemed unhappy with this. I said nothing more. September 12th. She was away for a few days visiting Albert. Today, however, I happily found her at home. When she got up from her chair to greet me, a small bird flew from its cage and landed on her shoulder.
"We got him for the children,"
she said, raising her hand for him to jump upon.
"He's very sweet. Watch how he gives me kisses."
I watched as the bird put its mouth against hers.
"Now he will give you one as well,"
she said, bringing the bird close to my lips. He removed his mouth from hers and then came over to me. He pressed his beak to my mouth, and I wanted to thank him for bringing this moment between she and I, for it was the closest we had ever come to a kiss. "He seems hungry," I said.
"I like to feed him from my mouth."
She took a seed and placed it between her lips. The bird then jumped over to her and took the seed. I had to look away, for my heart was beating very quickly. She should not do such things in front of me. She knows the feelings that I have for her. October 10th. How happy it makes me to look into her eyes. Albert, however, does not seem as happy to be with her as I would be if I were in his... Well, you know what I am trying to say. October 19th. I feel a great emptiness in my heart. I wish that I could just hold her one time. Then the emptiness of my heart would be filled. October 26th. Our lives are all so unimportant. I have grown more certain of this lately. While looking through a book in her small library, I overheard a conversation between Charlotte and a friend of hers. The conversation was quite simple. They talked about the people in town. It seemed that someone was quite sick, possibly dangerously sick.
"I heard that N is also ill,"
said Charlotte.
"Yes, he's doing very badly,"
replied the friend. I could see these people they were talking about in my mind suffering terribly as they tried to fight off death. It made me very sad to hear these two women talking about the dying in such a careless way. Their voices were so empty of feeling. It was as if they were talking about nothing important. I am writing this letter in her library now. I wonder to myself, what do I mean to her? What do I mean to my friends? Will people talk about me in such a cold way after I die? I have good friends, whom I occasionally make happy. Will they feel my absence when I am gone? Will they only miss me for a short time and later forget about me? So easily and quickly do people disappear from this world. After they are gone, it is as though they never existed. October 27th. Oh, it nearly drives me mad that I cannot make others feel the way I feel. I have such a deep desire for this woman, and yet she cannot feel the same. It is simply not within her. I have so many abilities and talents. However, this love I feel prevents me from using them. There is nothing I can do about it. I am useless as long as she is not mine. October 30th. Every time I am with her, I want to take her into my arms. It is natural for people to want to touch the things that they see, especially the beautiful things. Look at the way children behave in stores of any kind. I am not different. November 3rd. God, almost every night I get into bed and pray that I'll never open my eyes again. Mornings, especially sunny mornings, only sadden me now. I know why I suffer so much. I have brought all of this upon myself. It is no one else's fault. I am a different person now. Before, I looked at everything around me in a romantic and happy way. Not anymore. I feel that my soul is badly hurt and cannot be repaired. Nothing helps me to feel better now. Not even nature can bring a smile to my lips. I look at the countryside around me and feel nothing but emptiness inside. I cannot even cry any longer. I have found myself praying to God for tears, just like the farmer might pray for rain. God, however, does not give these things in order to please one sad person. Why can't I appreciate the things that He has already given me? Why must I only think of the things I have lost? November 8th. Wilhelm, Charlotte gently criticized me recently for my behavior. I have started to drink more than usual.
Stop this,
she said to me.
Do it for me.
Oh, I would do anything for her. If she only knew what I would do for her. I said, thoughts of you never leave my mind. Why, just the other day She interrupted me and began talking about something else, in order to prevent me from saying too much. I am completely in her hands. She can do with me whatever she wishes. November 15th. Again, Wilhelm, I appreciate your concern and suggestions for helping myself, but I must ask you to just let me suffer. I suffer greatly, but I can still manage to go on with my life. I am not at death's door. Religion is useful for people who suffer much, especially the dying. I feel, however, that God has forgotten about me. He does not hear my prayers to Him. Life is nothing but movement from one sad thing to another. It was this way for Jesus, the Son of God. Why should I pretend that it is any different for myself? November 21st. I do not think she is aware of the dangerous drink she is making for the two of us. It will certainly kill us both. I happily accept the drink because I cannot help myself. Why does she always give me such gentle looks? All right, Maybe she does not always do this, but occasionally. Sometimes she seems to enjoy the moments when I pour my heart out to her and tell her how I feel. Sometimes she seems to pity me. Just the day before, she took hold of my hand as I was turning to go and said,
"Goodbye, sweet Werther."
What did she mean by that? Never had she talked to me in such a way. Her voice keeps repeating those words in my brain again and again. I even said it aloud to myself before going to sleep last night. November 24th. She is aware of my sadness. In the morning, I visited her and she greeted me with only a look of silent pity. This moved me very much. If I had had the courage, I would have kissed her. In order to break the uncomfortable moment, she went to her piano and played a beautiful song. She sang, too. As I listened to her voice combine with the sound of the piano, my eyes saw nothing but those beautiful lips of hers, releasing the most beautiful sounds in the world. If I could kiss those lips just once, I could die happily. November 30th. I am changed forever. Today, I met a man while walking along the riverbank. His clothing was in terrible condition. When I came closer to him, I saw a look of calm sadness on his face. I asked him what he was looking for because his eyes seemed always to be searching the ground for something. I'm trying to find some flowers, he answered. But there are no flowers at this time of year, I said. Oh, no. There are plenty in my garden now, and very beautiful ones, too. I don't see any out here, though. It was clear that something was very wrong with him. From curiosity, I asked him why he was looking for flowers. I'm going to give them to my lover, he whispered. She is very beautiful and wealthy. I only wish I could give her more, but the king still hasn't paid me. Oh, how happy I used to be. If only I could feel that way again. Just then, an elderly lady some distance away began shouting for the man to come back home. I went to her and asked if she was the man's mother.
Yes, the poor dear. He's quite ill, but at least he's not violent now. He had to spend nearly a year in the mental hospital. Now he's calm, though, so he lives with us. He used to be such a talented young man. But one day, he became extremely sad, and things just got worse afterward.
He says that he used to be much happier. When was that? I asked.
He is talking about the time he spent in the hospital. That, of course, was when he was most mad. When, I guess, he had no sense of reality.
I then walked back to town very excited by what I had just heard. Are crazy people the only truly happy people in this world? That man believes that he has a wealthy princess lover. He even goes gladly to pick flowers for her in winter. I, meanwhile, feel no happiness. I see only reality. I see only what I cannot have. And yet this man is no longer happy. People will not leave him to his madness. They want him to see reality too. They do not realize that they only hurt him more. Why must people be so cruel to each other? The world is already a difficult place to live in. Why make it even worse by having so many cold people in it? God, you are everywhere, I know. But I still feel that I cannot find you. Please, I only want to come back to you like a son that returns to his father after a long journey. I have looked for happiness in other things, but have found none. Only you can provide this for me. I ask you, would a loving father ever turn away from his son? December 1st. Dear friend, That poor, crazy fellow I mentioned in my last letter used to work for Charlotte's father. He lost his job because he fell in love with Charlotte. He then lost his mind. Can you imagine how this news makes me feel? Albert told me all of this without any pity for the poor fellow. December 4th. I feel that I cannot go on like this for much longer. I was at Charlotte's today, holding one of her younger sisters in my lap, while listening to Charlotte play the piano. Of course, she played that favorite song of hers, and immediately memories of our first days together came rushing back into my mind. Then I began to think of all my sufferings since Albert returned to her. I could not stand it. I got to my feet and walked back and forth about the room, feeling terribly anxious and upset. Finally, I cried out, "For heaven's sake, stop playing that song!" Charlotte removed her hands from the keyboard and looked at me for a moment. Then she smiled and said,
I think that you are not at all well, Werther. Please, go home and get some rest, so that you can feel better.
Why, Wilhelm, does God not take pity upon me and finish my suffering? To the reader. Unfortunately, Werther wrote few letters in the remaining days of his life. Therefore, I will now tell the rest as I learned it from his friends and family. When the opportunity comes, I will include his last letters in the story, for they are the only way for us to really understand what happened and why it happened. Werther had become an extremely unhappy fellow. His sadness limited his ability to think clearly and made him very tired. This, of course, brought other problems for the poor fellow, which made his unhappiness even greater. I was told by Albert's friends that people began to dislike being with Werther, because his presence would make them uncomfortable. Albert, on the other hand, was the same as always. He loved Charlotte very much and was very proud to be her husband. His love and trust for her made it unnecessary for him to become jealous of Werther. In fact, on many occasions, I was told, he would let Werther spend time alone with Charlotte, because he felt that his friend would be happier being by himself with her. It had become a regular practice for Charlotte's father, who could no longer leave his home due to illness, to arrange for a carriage to take his daughter wherever she liked. The day after a bad snowstorm had hit the area, Werther decided to go and see if Charlotte might need help getting back to her house. He left his home with the usual things on his mind. He could not enjoy the sunshine of the day or the company of other people. He believed that he was causing problems between Albert and Charlotte. Although he was upset with himself for this, a quiet anger toward Albert also grew inside of himself. He would often think, "Everyone talks of Albert's great love for Charlotte. Why? He hardly pays any attention to her. He's gotten comfortable and lazy with their relationship. He no longer appreciates his fortune in having her as a wife. I wonder if he can ever appreciate her. I have accepted the fact that she is his, and that, because I trouble them so much, he will probably kill me one day. Have his feelings toward me changed? Does he feel that I only come to their home to see only Charlotte? Does this anger him? I feel that he hates it when I come over. I think that he hates me." These were the thoughts that flew round and round in Werther's head on the occasions when he would walk toward Charlotte's home. Often, he would stop along the way and think about going back to his home, but eventually he would always arrive at the hunting lodge. On this particular day, he found the children quite upset. The oldest boy told him that someone had been killed in Walheim. This neither surprised nor interested Werther, for his mind could think of nothing else but the woman he loved. Going further into the house, he found Charlotte trying to keep her father, a very sick man, from going out to learn more about the murder.
The only facts I have are the following. The dead man was found in front of his home. He had been a servant for a wealthy woman who lived alone. There was much talk around town about how he had recently replaced another servant who had been fired.
Hearing this, Werther suddenly awakened from his sadness and ran out of the house. He felt certain that the killer was the man he had talked with so many times before, the sad man who had been dismissed from the woman's service. Werther immediately went to the home where the body had been found. There, at the front door, a large mark had been left by the dead man's blood. Here was the result of a man's love and passion turned into hatred and physical harm. When Werther arrived at the small hotel in Walheim, he met a large crowd of people outside. Just then, a group of soldiers came marching down the road. They were accompanying a man to the hotel. As they were passing him, it was announced that the man they held was believed to be the killer. It was indeed the man who had been dismissed. Werther ran up to the prisoner and said, "You poor man! Why did you do this?" The man calmly looked at him and said without emotion, "Now she will always be unmarried." The soldiers then pushed the prisoner inside the hotel entrance and out of sight. Werther was very upset. He felt sorry for the man. It was his opinion that the man should not be punished too seriously, for his behavior could easily be understood. At that moment, he decided to try and help the man. He would speak to the judge and tell him of the man's problems. The judge would then see that the poor fellow could not be blamed for his actions. He went back to the hunting lodge and saw that Albert was now there with Charlotte and her father. For a moment, this made Werther uncomfortable. However, he quickly remembered the prisoner and immediately began to tell the judge what he knew. Even though he told the man's story with much excitement and feeling, the judge could not see how it made the killer less guilty of his crime. Werther continued his argument, but the judge, hearing no real arguments being made, stopped him in the middle of his sentence, saying, "The man killed someone. He did the worst thing a man can possibly do in this world. The man he killed was not attacking him, so there is nothing to prevent him from being punished. You should be ashamed of yourself, trying to persuade me that this murder was understandable and forgivable." The young man did not give up, however. He even suggested that the judge help the prisoner to escape somehow. The judge could not believe his ears and quickly ended the conversation. Several times during their discussion, Albert expressed his support of the judge's opinion. This angered Werther a great deal. He left them feeling as though Albert was now his personal enemy. In his mind's condition, he could not calm himself and recognize that Albert's agreement with the judge was quite natural and correct. If he did realize this, then he certainly could not admit it to himself. I managed to find a page in Werther's diary that expresses his attitude at this time. Why do I keep trying to persuade myself that Albert is a good man? The fact that he lives and breathes makes me suffer every day of my life. I cannot accept him. Towards the end of winter, as the snow was beginning to melt, Albert and Charlotte had a talk about Werther during an evening walk. Noticing that she seemed to miss having her friend visit so often, Albert felt the need to criticize him. "His love for you is a problem for us now. I wish that he would go away. However, knowing that he won't, I ask that you stop spending so much time with him. People are talking about us. I'm certain." Charlotte remained quiet after this. Beginning that day, Albert would never discuss Werther with his wife again. Even when she mentioned his name, he would not say anything in return, or he would simply change the subject. Not being able to help the prisoner, Werther sank into an even deeper sadness than before. He had no desire to do anything. He was further upset when he was asked to speak in the trial against the prisoner, who was now saying that he did not kill the man. All of Werther's past troubles suddenly came back into his mind. His embarrassment while working for the ambassador and his failure to win Charlotte before he left Walheim all became fresh injuries for himself. He did absolutely nothing but sit in his home and think about his sadness. Every day was the same for him, the same unhappiness, and the same dark hopelessness. And each day made him weaker and weaker, until he finally came to his sad end. There are a few letters that can give us some idea of how he was feeling. December 12th. Wilhelm, my troubles have made me into a simple man who feels that some devil is following me wherever I go, destroying my life bit by bit. Something inside of me has begun to press upon my chest, making it difficult for me to breathe. I go out for walks in the evenings, even during the worst weather, and enjoy the unpleasantness of everything around me. Just the day before, I was told that the recent rise in temperature has caused the rivers to flood the countryside I once loved to look at from that hill near the hotel. At midnight I went to the hill. The flood was much more serious and damaging than I had thought. The forests and fields were entirely covered in water, which was rapidly moving across the land. Seeing this, I felt both troubled and happy. I raised my arms toward the flowing water and cried, "Dive!" The idea of taking my life made me feel very good, suddenly. However, it eased my pain only for a brief moment, for then I felt unable to actually do it, to jump in. I guess that I am not quite ready to die yet. But, Wilhelm, how attractive the idea was at the moment. December 15th. Something is very wrong with me, Wilhelm. I am not myself lately. My deep feelings for her have always been honest and clean. I have never dreamt of doing anything disgustingly sexual with her. But, my God, how badly my dreams have suddenly turned. Every night it is the same. I take her into my arms and kiss her passionately, while she gently tries to refuse me. I lose my mind when I look into her eyes. How awful it is of me to enjoy such dreams, but, God help me, I do enjoy them, Wilhelm. Those moments seem so real. She is mine then, and the feeling is unbelievably good. I am sorry, Charlotte. My mind is weak. I have a sickness, but at the same time I am quite healthy. Oh, how I wish I were not living. Werther clearly could not get the idea of taking his life out of his mind. He had no other real hopes or desires in the world. However, if he were to do this, he wanted to plan it out very carefully and with a clear and peaceful mind. He did not want to take his life in a moment of passion. One paper I found, which I believe was supposed to be a letter to Wilhelm, paints a clearer picture of Werther's problems. There is no date on the paper and it was never sent. Although I am too tired to cry, her kindness toward me can still bring water to my eyes. To enter into death would be quite easy. You simply walk into the darkness and you are there. So why is it so hard for me to take that final step? I suppose it is because I do not know what is in that darkness, and because I can never come back. That step is truly final. The next letter seems to indicate that his decision was finally made. December 20th. Thank you again, Wilhelm, for your good and kind suggestion. I totally agree with you. I ought to leave this place. but I do not wish to come to your city right away. I would much prefer to travel for a short time beforehand. Your plan to come here personally and help me to leave is a very excellent one. However, I must ask that you wait a couple of weeks before coming. Please tell my mother that I am sorry to have made her suffer so often. It seems that I have always brought sadness to the people I should have made happy. Goodbye, friend. God bless you. Goodbye. At that point in time, Charlotte seems to have been attempting to be less close to Werther. Of course, this must have been hard for her. She knew that it would hurt the poor man, but she had to please her husband. Albert still never mentioned Werther at all, and Charlotte did the same in order to make him believe that her feelings were no different from his. Sometimes she would give Werther more time than she should have, because she felt quite sorry for him. After all, she was not a cold person. As soon as he had finished writing the previous letter to Wilhelm, Werther went to visit Charlotte. At the time, she was getting gifts ready for the children, for Christmas was only 4 days away. As he watched her work, he started talking about how happy Christmas had always made him as a child. He loved to see the tree decorated with all kinds of food and candles.
If you don't do anything wrong, I will give you a Christmas present this year,
Charlotte said. What do you mean, don't do anything wrong? He asked.
We will be opening gifts on Thursday evening. I'd like you to come and join us, but you should stay away from here until then. Our relationship has become uncomfortable for me, and I need to be away from you for a few days.
Werther stood up and began to walk back and forth in front of Charlotte, talking to himself the whole time. Seeing that he was so upset, Charlotte tried to change the subject, but he would not allow it. Then this is the last time for us to be together, he said.
Why do you say that?
She asked.
Do you always have to be so sensitive, Werther? Just try to relax and remember all of the good things about yourself. You are very intelligent, talented, and kind. All of these things will get you very far in life. Be strong and let go of this sadness that controls you. I believe that you only love me so much because you can't have me.
Werther suddenly looked up at her with seriousness in his face. I guess that your husband told you that. Very intelligent indeed, he said with a kind of laugh.
Yes, I believe it is correct,
she continued.
Find another girl, Werther. There are so many out there that could make you very happy. I cannot understand why you don't open your eyes to other possibilities. Go out into the world and look for your happiness. It's out there. I know it is.
I'll be fine. I just need a little while to get used to things, he responded.
Well, take the time you need, I suppose, but don't come back here until Thursday.
Just then, Albert entered the room. The two men silently greeted one another with a movement of their heads. Several meaningless words were exchanged between them, and then they fell silent again. Werther watched as Albert talked with his wife very briefly. He seemed a bit unfriendly and impatient toward her, and this upset Werther. He wanted very much to leave, but could not. Instead, he stayed several more hours, until finally he was no longer able to stand his discomfort. When he got home, he went straight to his bedroom, where he fell heavily onto his bed and began to cry. Eventually, his servant came in to help him get ready for bed. Werther remained silent until the servant was about to leave. Thank you. However, don't come tomorrow until I call for you, he said. As soon as he woke up the next day, he began work on a letter to Charlotte. The letter was not found until after he died. It was then given to Charlotte to read. It seems that he wrote it at different times over several days, so I will include it here in bits and pieces, as I believe he wrote it. I have decided, Charlotte, to kill myself. I am very clear and calm now. Today will be our last day together. When your eyes read over this page, this very unhappy man shall already be deep in the ground, resting peacefully, finally free from his sadness. I left your home yesterday feeling absolutely terrible. The last small amount of hope that I still had was finally gone. The world suddenly became completely empty of all joy. I spent the night in terrible pain. All kinds of thoughts entered and left my mind. Only one idea would not go away: death. I then fell asleep and awoke in the morning with the same idea in my brain. You must understand that I did not kill myself in a moment of wild anger. I knew for a while that one of us, you, Albert, or I, would have to die. Now I am clear that it must be me. When you go to the hill in Walheim that looks over the countryside, remember the many times I came from that land below to see you. Then look over at the cemetery, where my body rests, and watch as the wind gently blows the grass that grows above my resting body. Ah, and now my eyes have filled with tears again. Later that morning, Werther informed the servant that he would be going on a trip. He asked the man to help him prepare by getting together his clothes and taking 8 weeks' pay to the poor people in the area whom he often helped. He had his morning meal alone, and then went to see the judge. The fellow was out at the time, so Werther waited for him to return. He, therefore, had much time to think again, and all of his unhappy memories came rushing back into his mind. Charlotte's children found Werther waiting in the garden and immediately gathered around him. They were excited about getting their gifts in a few days, and were having fun trying to guess what their sister had gotten them. "Yes, children, just a few days more," Werther repeated, taking each of them in his arms. As he was about to stand up to leave, the smallest boy spoke something softly into his ear. "My big brother made several wishes for the new year for our dad, Charlotte, Albert, and you. You'll all get your wish the morning of the new year." This moved Werther. He thanked the boy and then quickly left. Early in the evening, he went back to his home and asked the servant to make a few more preparations for the coming trip. It seems that he then sat down and added another paragraph to his letter to Charlotte. "I know that you think you will not see me until the day before Christmas. However, this cannot happen, for I will be gone by that time. No, I must see you today one last time. I cannot tell you how good it feels to know that I will soon be dead." Since their last talk, Charlotte had been feeling quite guilty. She knew that what she had said had hurt Werther. She felt sorry for him and actually missed having him around so often. Charlotte told Albert that she had asked Werther not to visit until the day before Christmas. As usual, he made no response, but simply changed the subject for a bit and then left to do some necessary business with another person in town. After Albert was gone, Charlotte found herself alone with her thoughts. She was very pleased with her marriage. It seemed almost perfect to her, and she truly loved her husband. At the same time, she had become quite close to Werther. From the very first day they met, it was obvious that they shared the same ideas and interests. She very much enjoyed their conversations and would often share her most personal thoughts with him. Now, after not seeing him for several days, she began to feel a little empty. It was her hope that he might fall in love with one of her friends and get married. Then she could see him as often as before, but without any uncomfortable feelings between them. As she thought about which friend to introduce him to, Charlotte found them all unsatisfactory. Then she realized that she did not really want him to marry anyone. She did not want to share Werther with anybody. This realization upset her terribly and made her feel even guiltier. She did not like to admit that she had such a purpose, and yet it was clearly the truth. When, later that evening, she heard Werther's voice come from the front door, her heart began to beat quickly. She felt that she could not control herself. When he entered the room, she said,
"You promised not to come."
"No, I didn't," he replied.
"Please, it is very important that you stay away. Please,"
she cried. Without thinking, she asked the servant to call for her friends to come and visit, in order to have other people around during Werther's visit. He laid some books on the table and asked about a few others he had lent her before. Meanwhile, Charlotte was secretly hoping her friends would not come. Her mind was wild. She moved from her seat to the piano, and from there to the window, until she finally ended up seated next to Werther on the sofa.
"Well, if you haven't any books to look through now, I still have Ossian's songs, which you lent me,"
Charlotte said.
"I would very much like to hear you read them to me."
Werther got up and took the book from the shelf. His body shook for a moment as he opened it. Then, sitting down again, and with tears in his eyes, he started to recite the words before him. The poem was about a gathering of souls on a beautiful hillside. They were the souls of heroes who had died in battle long ago. There on the hillside, the gods of music joined them and sang songs that told the story of each fallen hero. One song was about Salgar, whose lover Kolma waited for him to return to her from a battle in which he had to fight against her father and brother, who hated him. Sadly, all three of them died. Yet poor Kolma continued to sit alone on the hill, waiting and asking herself,
"Why does he not come back to me?"
She sat through the worst storms, fully expecting her dead lover to keep his promise and return to her. She called out to him,
"Salgar, come to me. I am lonely."
The souls of her dead brother and father appeared before her, and she begged them to speak to her. However, they did not say a word. Kolma saw the blood on their weapons, and she knew that her lover was dead. She then decided to join her lost lover in death. Another song then told the story of Morar, who was one of the greatest fighters in history. He was famous for his skill with the sword and for his quickness on the battlefield. He had reached true greatness in his life, and yet he eventually died just like everyone else, but without any mother or lover to cry over his tomb. He had no child to carry on his name. This song would remind the world of his greatness. All the souls felt sad hearing such stories. The saddest among them, however, was a living human named Armin, who was also present on the hillside. He was thinking of his son, who died quite young. Another living man next to him asked him why he was feeling so badly when he heard such beautiful music was being sung to them. Armin turned to his neighbor and said, "You have not lost any children. Your home and family are doing very well. I, however, am the last living member of my family. My poor daughter Dora is deep in the cold ground. I hear no songs being sung for her." Armin then called upon the moon to remind him of the terrible day when he lost both of his children, Arundel and Dora. "She was very beautiful, my daughter, and my son was a great fighter. One day another man, a famous soldier named Armar, came to ask for Dora to marry him. She agreed. However, then a man named Erath came to find Armar. He was angry because Armar had killed his brother. Discovering Armar's love for Dora, Erath decided to play a cruel trick on her. He pointed to an island far out in the sea and told her that her lover Armar was there waiting for her. She let Erath take her to the island in a boat.
Amar, I have come to you,
she cried. However, no answer came. When she turned around, she saw that Erath had taken the boat and left her alone on the island. Dora then called for her brother and me. My son Arundel heard her cries while he was hunting. He ran down to the sea and found Erath standing next to his boat. Full of anger, he tied the evil man to a tree and then took the boat to get his sister. Meanwhile, Armar returned and misunderstood the situation. He heard his lover crying out from the island and thought that the man in the boat was responsible for her troubles. He threw his great spear with all of his strength and killed Arundel. The boat turned over as the young man fell into the water. Armar then jumped into the sea to swim to Dora, but the water pulled him under and he drowned. For many days and nights I stood on the beach, helplessly listening to my daughter's cries. I could see her in the moonlight. A terrible storm came in the night. By sunrise her voice could hardly be heard because she had lost so much strength. Soon after she died of sadness and hunger. Now I have no one. I am alone in the world. All of my courage, all of my hope is gone. Every day I spend my time looking out at that island. I can sometimes see the spirits of my son and daughter over there in the moonlight. Charlotte became full of emotion and soon started to cry. Hearing this, Werther closed the book and ran over to comfort her on the sofa. He too began to cry. Both of them were sad now, for they could see much of themselves in this poem. Werther rested his head on Charlotte's shoulder. She was shaking. She wanted to leave him, but her pity and sadness would not let her. After gathering some strength, she begged Werther to go. He was moved by the show of emotion, and his heart filled with feeling. Immediately he reopened the book and, with a shaking voice, finished the last lines of the poem. I feel that my time has come. Even though the warm air of spring tells me that there are many beautiful days ahead, I know that my body is tired and weak. Today's storm shall wash me away from the earth. Werther closed the book, feeling very upset. He then ran over to Charlotte and took her hands in his. He wildly brought her hands over his eyes and cheeks. Charlotte suddenly began to truly understand her friend's sadness. She pulled him toward her and let the side of her face rest against his. Everything in the world was gone. Only the two of them existed at that moment. Werther held her tightly, and then turned his lips upon hers, kissing her very deeply.
Oh, no, Werther,
she weakly cried, turning her head to the side. She then cried out again.
No, Werther.
He let go of her and then pulled himself free from her arms, before dropping to the ground. Charlotte spoke with a voice full of emotion.
We shall never meet again, Werther.
Then she ran into the next room and closed the door behind her. The sound of a key being turned in the door could be heard. Werther remained on the floor for another 30 minutes until the servant came into his room. He walked over to the bookshelf and pretended to be looking for something until the servant finally walked out again. He then walked over to the door Charlotte had locked and whispered into it. Just let me say goodbye to you one last time. No response came from inside. He waited a while longer and then, forcing himself away, he cried out once more, Goodbye, Charlotte! Goodbye for all time! Werther quickly left the village, passing through the front gate without a word from the guards who stood there. The weather was terrible that night. The ground was covered with a mixture of rain and snow. He made it home before midnight. The servant found him standing in extremely wet clothes in the doorway. His hat was missing. It was later found high upon a rock that overlooked the countryside. How he managed to climb it in such bad weather and not fall to his death is a mystery. When the servant brought him some coffee late the following morning, he found Werther busily adding to his letter to Charlotte. "This shall be my final morning, dearest woman. Never again will I see the sunrise. But in truth, the sun has been hidden from me for quite some time now. Therefore, dead or alive, I would miss it all the same. What a feeling it gives me to say out loud to myself, 'This is the end, the very end.' It is amazing to think that I am here now, full of young, healthy blood, but that tomorrow my body will be silent and cold. What does dying mean? So little do people understand it. Today I live and I am completely yours. Tomorrow we will no longer be together. Think about that for a moment. I will be dead, Charlotte. I will lay deep in the earth, in a small, dark box. My closest friend in the world died when I was younger. I remember the sounds of death at her funeral, the sound of the ropes lowering her box into the ground, the sound of dirt falling upon wood as they began to fill in the hole. Those sounds filled me with so much sadness that I grew weak and fell to the ground. Oh, death! I am so sorry about what happened yesterday. I should have died as soon as I left you. That brief moment when we held one another was the happiest moment in my life. I can still feel your kiss upon my lips. Please do not hate me for this. Since that first night we danced together, I guess that you felt something special for me. Yet, whenever Albert was around, it seemed impossible that you could feel anything but common friendship for me. The time when you gave me those flowers, I spent the entire night holding them, believing that they proved your love for me. But then, after a while, this feeling began to disappear little by little, until it was completely gone. Though all things die and eventually are completely forgotten, our kiss will go on forever. At that moment you loved me. For me, that moment can never die. I was yours and you were mine, and that shall never change. I know that what I did yesterday was wrong. I know that the world would think of me as a bad man. Yet I do not regret what I did. In fact, I feel that it was the greatest thing I have ever done. Let the world be angry. I will accept whatever punishment comes to me. From now on, you belong to no one but me. Albert may be called your husband, but in truth you belong to me and only me. In heaven I shall wait for you. The moment you arrive, I will announce to God that you are mine, and together, with Him, we will live forever. And we will be with your mother as well. I shall meet her and love her just as you love her. No, I am not crazy now. I see things more clearly the closer I approach the time to die. I will share my most personal dreams and desires with your mother, so that she will know me as well as you know me. Later that morning, Werther gave his servant a note to deliver to Albert. In it he wrote only one sentence. I am going on a trip. May I borrow your guns? Goodbye. Charlotte had remained sleepless the entire night before, for her greatest fears had all suddenly come true. All kinds of thoughts were rushing into her head, demanding her immediate attention. She felt upset and confused. Did she enjoy that moment in Werther's arms? Did she feel angry with him for doing such a thing? Did she miss the simpler days of the past, when she was unaware of such confusing feelings inside of herself? Why was she hiding what happened yesterday from Albert? She wondered whether it would be a good way to break the silence that had been between them for some time now. She wanted him to know everything about her, so that he could completely understand and accept her. At the same time, she was afraid to share her deepest, most personal thoughts with him. How would he feel about her then? But would she be able to hide such feelings from someone she was so close to? And of course there was Werther, who was now gone from her life, but whom she could not stop thinking about. She was well aware that he could never be happy without her. The fact that she and her husband had gone for so long without talking to each other upset her a great deal. Why did they behave in such a way? They were two good people who truly loved each other. All they needed to do in order to be happy was be open and honest, and yet they could not for some strange reason. She felt that she and her husband were a little to blame for Werther's troubles. If she and Albert had made their feelings clear to one another much earlier, the bad relationship that developed between she and Werther might have been avoided. Charlotte and Albert did not take Werther's talk about killing himself very seriously. He talked of it often to both of them. Albert hated listening to such things and began to criticize Werther for it. He told them that he did not believe that he really wanted to die, but that he just liked the attention he got when talking about it. Charlotte also began to think in this way, but would sometimes become a little worried. She, of course, did not tell her husband about such occasional worries. When Albert came home that night, Charlotte was clearly uncomfortable. He had had a bad day himself. The work he had hoped to finish was still incomplete, and he felt that the villager he was dealing with was a very unpleasant fellow. Therefore, he was in quite a bad mood. Right away, Charlotte told him that Werther had come by the night before. Albert said nothing in response, but simply asked for his mail. After learning from the servant that everything was on the table in the next room, he left Charlotte by herself in the living room. Albert's presence helped ease Charlotte's pain a little. She thought about how loving and kind he had been to her in the past, and this made her feel good again. She went to join him in his office and found him looking through his mail. His face seemed unhappy with what he was reading. She asked him what was wrong, and he responded with a very short and unclear answer, and then began to write at his desk. Charlotte sat silently with him, doing her sewing for quite a long while. As time went along, her overall feeling returned to sadness again. She did not know how to talk with Albert about her troubles. And the more she tried to hide her sadness from him, the worse she felt. When Werther's servant came knocking on the office door with a letter for Albert, Charlotte felt very uncomfortable. Albert looked at it briefly and then said without feeling, "Take the guns and tell him to have a nice trip." Charlotte's heart nearly jumped out of her chest when she heard him say this. She walked as if she were in a dream over to the other side of the room. There, with her hands shaking, she picked up the guns and stood staring at them for a moment. Albert looked at her and gestured for her to hurry up. She then silently gave the guns to the servant. As soon as he disappeared out of the door, she ran up to her bedroom feeling quite frightened for her poor friend. She guessed that something terrible was going to happen. Her first thought was to go and tell Albert about Werther's last visit, and how she was to blame in some ways for what happened. But she then realized that this would not change her husband's mind about Werther. She went down to the dining room for dinner. A friend of hers joined the couple at the table and, by talking the whole time, did a good job covering up the discomfort between husband and wife. Eventually, no one thought any more about what had happened that morning. Werther was extremely pleased to hear from his servant that Charlotte had personally given him the guns. It seemed very appropriate to him. After having some food and drink, he encouraged the servant to go and have dinner at the hotel. Then he began to write some more. These 2 instruments of death were last touched by your fingers. I hold them to my chest and run my hand over them very gently, trying to imagine the way you gave them to my servant. For me, this is a sign that you and God support my plan. It is a dream come true for me. My servant told me how you gave him the guns with shaking hands. However, it seems you did not ask him to tell me goodbye. I suppose that I did not deserve a goodbye. I behaved so badly toward you the other day. Still, it upsets me terribly that you should be so cold toward me after receiving my kisses. How can you feel nothing towards a man whose love for you is so great? When the servant came back, Werther asked him to finish making the preparations for his trip. Werther then left his home to go and pay certain people whom he owed money. He came back home for a short time and then left again, even though it was raining outside. He spent several hours walking further and further from town, but finally returned home in order to write some more. My friend Wilhelm, I just came back from a long walk, where I took the time to observe the beauty of the countryside one final time. Goodbye. I hope that my mother can understand why I have done this, and will not feel too badly toward me. Please help her to understand, Wilhelm. Thank you. All of the money I owed people has been paid. I am leaving the world an honest man. Goodbye. I shall see you in heaven one day. Then we can all be together again in a happier place. Albert, I have been unkind to you. I apologize for this. I have troubled your relationship with Charlotte. The 2 of you are less happy together now. Goodbye. I hope that by dying, I can save your marriage and, once again, bring you joy. Please, Albert, I beg you, do everything you can to keep that sweet woman, the sweetest of all women, happy. May God protect you both. When the day grew dark, he began to gather all of his important papers. He threw some of them in the fire and arranged the others neatly in an envelope for Wilhelm. I have looked through those pages myself. They are a collection of Werther's thoughts as he wrote them out from time to time over the years. Later that night, he had a fire built in his fireplace and a bottle of wine delivered to his table. He then sent his servant to bed for the night. The servant did not bother to change into his bedclothes, for he wanted to be ready for Werther's trip, which would begin early in the morning at sunrise. It is now after 11. The world is quiet and I am feeling very peaceful. I appreciate God giving me the power and bravery I need in these last few hours. I can see the stars high up in the sky, giving light to all of the worlds beyond ours. You will always shine, stars. God supports us both. I just finished looking at my favorite group of stars, the Greater Bear, which always guided me back to my home after being with Charlotte. God, how happy I have felt in the past when looking at it. It has seen me in my finest moments, full of thoughts about the one I love. But of course, everything I look at seems to remind me of her. I keep all things that her hand has touched, and look at them as though they were gold. I am giving your picture back to you now. Please take care of it, for it brought me many happy moments. It is covered with my kisses. I have made it clear to your father that I want to be buried so that my tombstone lies under the shade of the 2 large trees in the cemetery, facing the fields beyond. Please be sure that this is done. He was a friend of mine. I am sure he will not fail me. If, however, the townspeople feel that I do not deserve to lie in the same cemetery as their family members, then bury me in some place in the countryside where nobody goes. Or put me near the main road, where traveling priests can pray for my soul as they walk by. I am not afraid of death, Charlotte. I am not afraid to swallow the poison you have personally prepared for me. Everything is over for me now. I have done all that I wish to do in this life. I am approaching death's door with courage. To die for you would have been my greatest achievement, my greatest gift to you. If I knew that by dying I could make your life as pleasant as it once was before, I would go running, happily, into the arms of death. Unfortunately, it is seldom that people get to die as heroes. Please make sure that they put me in the ground wearing the clothes I died in. These were the clothes I wore when we shared that special moment together in your living room. I have not changed them since that time. Your father is aware of this wish. Please remind him not to let anyone check my pockets. I have here this ribbon that once was a part of the dress you were wearing when we first met. Oh, how I remember seeing you among those children of yours. Give them all many kisses and let them know what happened to me. God, how I love you, Charlotte, and everything about you. From the moment my eyes rested upon your beautiful figure, I loved you. The ribbon you gave me on my birthday should be put in my box, next to my heart. It is amazing to think back to those days. I never would have guessed that things would turn out this way. Ah, but all is well. All is well. The guns have been prepared. It is now midnight. Goodbye, Charlotte. Goodbye. The people next door to his home heard the gunshot, but because no other sound followed, they guessed that nothing was wrong. The servant came into Werther's room at sunrise and saw him lying in a pool of blood on the floor. Immediately he checked to see if his master was still living. He heard a very soft heartbeat and quickly called for a doctor. He then went to get Albert. Charlotte awoke to the sound of his knock at their door. Both she and her husband went to the front door. The servant was terribly upset. Tears poured down his cheeks. He managed to tell them what happened. Hearing his words, Charlotte suddenly grew weak and fell to the ground. Werther's hands and feet were beginning to turn cold by the time the doctor arrived. He examined the poor man and saw that the gun had successfully shot its bullet through the front of the head. The doctor cut an area on his patient's arm to let the blood flow. It was clear, looking at how the blood had spilled onto the floor, that Werther had shot himself while seated at his desk. He had fallen from his chair to the ground. The servant discovered him facing up. He was completely dressed. The news quickly spread throughout the town and everyone came outdoors. Albert got to the house and found Werther lying in his bed with a cloth wrapped around his head. His face was deathly white. He lay there very, very still, his chest rising and falling in very small, delicate breaths. The doctor told Albert that he expected death to come at any moment. A bottle of red wine was sitting upon Werther's desk. Only one glass had been drunk the night before. I will not bother to mention anything about Albert's feelings nor Charlotte's, as this should be rather obvious to the reader. The old judge came with his two oldest sons to say goodbye, as soon as he heard the news. He was terribly sad. He and Werther had become quite good friends. And of course, Werther had always been good to his children. Each of the boys took turns kissing his face and hugging him, crying uncontrollably the whole time. The oldest boy did not leave him until he finally died at around 12 o'clock. Because Werther had planned everything so well, he was quickly buried that evening in the exact location he had wished to be placed. The only people present at his funeral were the judge and his boys, and the two workers who placed his box in the ground. Neither Albert nor Charlotte could attend. Charlotte's sadness was too great. He was buried without a priest's blessing. End.